Did you know that the human body can begin sending signals that death is approaching? Not days before, but sometimes weeks or even months in advance? I'm Dr. William Carter, and after more than 3 decades caring for older adults in hospitals, long-term care, and family homes, I've learned something that most people never hear in medical school. When the end of life is near, the body knows. Long before a doctor gives a diagnosis, long before machines detect a problem, long before the family senses anything is wrong, the body begins a silent transition, a slow shift from survival mode to conservation. It starts to protect what's most vital, let go of what's less essential, and prepare for what comes next. And during that process, it sends clear, observable signs. Not dramatic, not sudden, but real. Today, I'll show you the 8 signs that I've seen appear again and again in people nearing the final chapter of life. These signs are not about sickness or pain. They are about biology, energy, and the wisdom of the human body, when it knows that time is limited. And here's something you may not expect. These signs don't only appear in people who are terminally ill. In fact, I've seen many of them in older adults who are still living independently, still smiling, still talking with their families, until something began to change. They started sleeping more, eating less, pulling away from conversations, feeling cold even in warm rooms, not because they were sad, but because their body was slowly turning inward. Most families miss these signs. They think it's just aging, just a bad day, just part of getting older. But once you learn what to look for, you start to see things differently. You'll begin to recognize that the person in front of you isn't giving up. Their body is simply preparing in ways we don't often talk about, preparing in ways that are ancient, natural, and deeply human. If you're over 60, or if you care for someone who is, please stay with me. What I'm going to share in this video could help you prepare with grace instead of fear. It could help you understand what's happening instead of feeling confused. And most importantly, it could help you care more deeply and compassionately for the people who matter most in your life. Let's begin with the first sign. It's subtle, it's common, and once you see it for what it truly is, it changes everything. One of the earliest and most overlooked signs that the body may be nearing the end of life is a gradual but significant change in appetite. But I want to be clear, this is not just about eating less. It's about a specific shift that happens deep inside the body, when it begins to sense that energy is limited and must be conserved. You see, digestion is one of the most energy-intensive processes in the human body. It takes effort to chew, to swallow, to break down food, to move it through the intestines, to absorb nutrients. In fact, the digestive system uses up to 20% of our daily energy, even when we're at rest. When the body begins to prioritize survival, it doesn't waste that energy on digestion anymore. I've seen this in patient after patient. Older adults who used to enjoy rich meals, favorite dishes, and family dinners suddenly begin pushing food away, not out of depression, not out of frustration, but because their body no longer wants to invest energy in processing solid food. What often happens first is a preference for liquids, soups, thin broths, juice, milk, nutritional shakes. The appetite for complex, heavy meals fades, and the person may begin asking only for small sips or cold drinks throughout the day. Families are often alarmed. They bring in favorite meals, they try to encourage eating, they plead, they worry, they even argue, thinking that if their loved one would just eat, they would get stronger again. But here's what I want you to know. The loss of appetite at this stage is not the cause of the decline. It's a symptom of the body already shifting into a different mode, a mode of preservation. Inside the brain, a region called the hypothalamus plays a major role in controlling hunger and thirst. And when that part of the brain receives signals that the heart is struggling, or that oxygen levels are low, or that the intestines are slowing down, it reduces hunger on purpose. It's not a failure, it's a strategy, a way for the body to conserve energy and protect what little strength remains. In some cases, this change can happen over several weeks. In others, it appears in just a few days. But in nearly every patient I've cared for near the end of life, this pattern appears, and it's often the first real sign that something deeper is beginning to shift. What should you look for? Watch for a steady decline in portion size, a shift toward liquids, and a loss of interest in favorite foods. If your loved one begins refusing solid meals, or says they just aren't hungry, and especially if this happens alongside other changes I'll share later, don't assume they're being stubborn. Their body is speaking. And if you listen carefully, it's not asking for food. It's asking for peace, comfort, and less effort. You can still offer love through soft foods, favorite flavors, and gentle sips. But don't force. Don't fight. Instead, recognize the wisdom of what's happening and adjust with compassion. This change in appetite is often the first sign, but what comes next is just as important and just as easy to misinterpret. Let's talk now about sleep and why the body begins to spend more and more time in silence and rest when death is near. Another early and powerful sign that the body is preparing for the end of life is a dramatic shift in sleep patterns. Again, I want to be clear, this is not the typical tiredness we associate with aging. It's something far deeper, more persistent, and more purposeful. In my years of practice, I've seen this pattern emerge again and again. A person who once followed a fairly regular routine, waking at 7 a.m., eating meals at normal times, engaging in conversations during the day, begins to drift. They start sleeping later in the morning, napping through the afternoon, staying awake at odd hours of the night. At first, families think it's just a rough week. Maybe they're under the weather. Maybe they didn't sleep well last night. But then the pattern continues. What's really happening is that the brain is shifting into a mode of energy preservation. When we sleep, our metabolism slows by about 15%. Heart rate drops, breathing slows, body temperature falls. It's one of the most effective ways the body can conserve energy. And when life is nearing its end, energy becomes a precious resource. Sleep becomes not just a rest, but a strategy. Deep inside the brain, in the pineal gland, the production of melatonin, the hormone that regulates our sleep-wake cycles, starts to decline more sharply than usual. Unlike the gradual melatonin loss that occurs with aging, this drop is steep and disruptive. The result, the body's natural circadian rhythm breaks down. The person may sleep more during the day and remain restless or alert at night. They may have trouble distinguishing day from night. They may doze off mid-conversation or wake confused in the dark. At the same time, the brain also reduces production of key neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, the chemicals that keep us alert, focused, and emotionally balanced. When those levels fall, the body naturally retreats inward. It slows down. It prioritizes stillness. You may notice your loved one sleeping 18 to 20 hours per day. They may seem hard to wake. They may appear dazed or distant, as if their mind is somewhere far away. Families often find this frightening. They worry that something is wrong or that the person is giving up. But it's not about giving up. It's about preserving what little strength remains for the functions that matter most, like breathing, circulation, and brainstem activity. What should you look for? Pay attention to patterns. Does the person seem harder to wake? Do they drift off more often? Even while sitting up or eating, do they confuse night and day? Do they feel stuck between sleep and wakefulness, neither fully alert nor fully asleep? These are all signs that the body is turning inward, and when this happens, alongside loss of appetite, it's a strong indication that the body has begun its final preparation. Let go of the idea that more stimulation will help. Instead, offer quiet, calm, and presence. Speak gently. Sit nearby. Let the rhythm of rest be respected. Next, we'll look at a sign that doesn't involve sleep or food, but one you can see and feel clearly with your own hands. Let's talk about what happens to the skin and circulation when life begins to fade. One of the clearest and most visible signs that the body is nearing the end of life appears right on the surface. In the skin, the hands, the feet, and the nails. This is not just about looking pale or tired. It's about a systematic shift in blood circulation, one that the body initiates as part of a survival mechanism when energy is limited. Here's what's happening. As the heart weakens and oxygen delivery becomes more difficult, the body begins to prioritize blood flow to its most vital organs, the brain, the heart itself, and the lungs. That means less blood is sent to areas considered less essential for survival, such as the hands, feet, arms, and legs. What you'll begin to see is coolness in the extremities, hands and feet that feel cold to the touch, even in a warm room. Fingers and toes that seem slightly bluish or purple under the nails. This bluish color is called cyanosis, and it's a clear indication that oxygenated blood isn't reaching those tissues effectively. In many of my patients, these changes happen slowly at first. A hand that used to be warm now feels cool in the mornings. Feet that used to stay pink now show patches of purple or blue. Over time, these changes deepen, but there's more. The skin itself begins to change in texture and tone. It may become thinner, more fragile, or slightly translucent. In some areas, especially around the legs, arms, or back, you may notice mottled patterns, a mix of pale skin with purplish or reddish blotches. These patterns are called levator reticularis, and they appear when tiny blood vessels near the surface stop receiving steady circulation. Some families mistake these patterns for bruise. Others think it's poor hygiene or a circulation disorder. But in many cases, this is simply the body shifting into preservation mode, sending fewer resources to the periphery so it can keep the center alive. In advanced stages, the skin may appear yellowish or develop non-painful dark spots, especially on the arms and legs. These are not injuries. They're signs that the tiny vessels in the skin are no longer fully active. One more thing to observe: dryness. As hydration decreases, the skin around the eyes and mouth often becomes dry, cracked, or flaky. This is another signal that the body is conserving fluids for deeper functions and deprioritizing surface hydration. So what should you do? First, recognize that these changes are not caused by something you did or didn't do. They're part of a natural biological shift. You can support comfort with warm blankets, soft lotion, and gentle touch. But understand that the skin is telling you something. It's saying that the body is retreating from the outer world and focusing on its core. It's reducing circulation, not out of failure, but out of strategy. Together with loss of appetite and increased sleep, these skin changes are some of the strongest early signs that the body is preparing for its final phase. Next, we'll look at one of the most misunderstood signs of all. Not what you see, but what you hear. The sound and rhythm of breathing can reveal more than most people realize. One of the most revealing signs that the body is nearing the end of life is a change in the pattern and rhythm of breathing. This sign often goes unnoticed until it becomes pronounced. But for those who know what to look for, it can offer powerful insight into how the body is managing its final resources. As the heart weakens and circulation becomes less efficient, the lungs begin to struggle to maintain normal oxygen exchange. But the first sign is not always shortness of breath. It's usually irregularity. The person may begin breathing in a pattern known as Cheyne-Stokes respiration. It's a cycle that starts with shallow breathing, followed by deeper breaths, and then a sudden pause, sometimes lasting several seconds, before the cycle begins again. To someone unfamiliar with this pattern, it may seem frightening. The pauses can feel like the person has stopped breathing altogether. Then suddenly, they take a deep, gasping breath. Families often panic, thinking the person is suffocating or in pain. But in most cases, this breathing pattern is not painful. It's a result of the brain's respiratory center, located in the brainstem, responding to inconsistent signals about oxygen and carbon dioxide levels in the blood. As the brain receives these erratic signals, it adjusts breathing in waves, rather than in a smooth, steady rhythm. It's a sign that the body is trying to maintain balance, even as its systems begin to fail. You may also notice that the person breathes more rapidly, even when at rest. This is the body trying to compensate for decreased oxygen delivery by increasing the respiratory rate. The chest rises and falls more frequently, and the breaths may sound shallow or strained. In some cases, the person may have difficulty speaking in full sentences, a few words, then a pause to catch their breath. You may also hear soft gurgling sounds, especially at night or when lying flat. This happens when the muscles involved in swallowing begin to relax, allowing saliva or mucus to accumulate in the throat. Again, this is often more distressing for observers than it is for the person themselves. Most people at this stage are not in respiratory distress. Their awareness of discomfort is reduced, and the irregular breathing reflects internal adjustments more than suffering. What should you look for? Pay attention to changes in rhythm and effort. Does the breathing cycle seem uneven? Are there long pauses? Is the person using more energy just to breathe? Have nighttime sounds changed? Do they struggle to finish sentences? These are all signs that the respiratory system is slowing down. You can help by adjusting their position. Often elevating the head or turning them slightly to the side brings relief. A calm environment, cool air in the room, and quiet presence can all support comfort. More than anything, know that these changes are not a crisis, but a part of the body's final conservation. The breath slows, the effort reduces, the body is preparing to let go. In the next part, we'll move from the lungs to the mind and explore the changes in mental clarity, memory, and behavior that often appear when the end of life is near. As the body prepares for the end of life, one of the most painful but revealing changes is not physical, it's mental, a slow, quiet withdrawal of the mind from the outside world. This is often the moment when families start to feel a deep emotional shift. The person they know, their parent, their partner, their loved one, seems to begin fading not just in strength, but in presence. But what's happening is not a sudden decline or a psychological break. It's a biological reorganization of energy. The brain, just like the rest of the body, is starting to conserve, and that means prioritizing core survival functions, while reducing everything that is cognitively. The first sign is usually difficulty concentrating. The person may struggle to follow a conversation, lose track of what's being said, or drift off mentally, even while others are speaking. What used to be simple interactions now require more energy than the brain can spare. Next, you may notice a loss of interest in activities that once brought joy. Watching television, doing puzzles, listening to music, calling family, things that used to matter deeply are now met with indifference. This isn't depression, it's a neurological shift. The brain is simplifying, streamlining, letting go. Then comes the change in memory. Short-term memory begins to fade. The person may forget what they had for breakfast or who visited yesterday. But interestingly, long-term memories often remain vivid. Stories from childhood, names from decades ago, emotions tied to past events. That's because the areas of the brain responsible for new memories, especially the hippocampus, are some of the first to reduce function when energy is low. What's spared are the deep, older memories, stored in areas that require less constant activity. And so, many families find themselves surprised when their loved one forgets today's date, but can recall a moment from 50 years ago with clarity. Another powerful sign is social withdrawal. The person may begin to speak less, seek less contact, and prefer to be alone. This is often misinterpreted as sadness or detachment, but in reality, the brain is working in survival mode. Speech, social interaction, and emotional engagement all require energy. And when energy is low, the body reduces output to preserve core life functions. It's as if the person is turning inward, preparing for something quiet and personal. Families often take this personally. They feel rejected, confused, or hurt. But what they don't see is that the brain is not rejecting love. It's simply rationing its final reserves. What should you look for? Watch for reduced attention span, limited engagement in conversation, frequent mental pauses, or a growing desire to be alone. Notice if your loved one seems less responsive to things they used to care about. These are not signs of giving up. They are signs of letting go, gently, naturally, neurologically. In the next part, we'll return to the body and explore the hands and feet. What happens to the extremities during this stage reveals more than most people realize. In the final stages of life, some of the most telling changes appear in the hands and feet, not just in temperature or color, but in shape, texture, and control. By this point, the body has already begun prioritizing circulation to the heart, lungs, and brain. But over time, even those systems begin to slow, and what happens in the extremities becomes a mirror of how the entire system is functioning. One of the clearest signs is swelling, especially in the hands, feet, ankles, and lower legs. This swelling, called edema, is different from the puffiness caused by a salty meal or minor inflammation. It's deeper. It lingers. If you press gently on the swollen skin with your finger, you may notice that it leaves an indentation, a fingerprint that stays visible for several seconds. This is called pitting edema, and it indicates that fluid is accumulating in the tissues because the heart is no longer strong enough to pump it back through the system. At the same time, the lymphatic system responsible for draining excess fluid is slowing down as well. It becomes less efficient, allowing fluid to collect in the lower parts of the body due to gravity. But there's more. The nails may begin to change. They can grow thicker, more yellowed, or even start to lift away from the nail bed. This happens because the cells responsible for nail growth are not receiving enough oxygen or nutrients to maintain normal function. In more advanced stages, you may notice the tips of the fingers becoming rounder, softer, and more swollen. This is known as clubbing or digital clubbing. It's a response to chronic low oxygen in the blood, and it signals that the peripheral tissues are no longer being fully supported. Another sign is a loss of fine motor control. Tasks that were once simple, like buttoning a shirt, holding a utensil, or gripping a cup, may become difficult or even impossible. This isn't just muscle weakness. It's a reflection of reduced neurological input to the hands. The brain and nerves that control these small movements are receiving less oxygen, and as a result, the control begins to fade. Families often miss these signs until they become obvious. They may think their loved one is tired or weak, but what they're seeing is the body's silent adjustment, limiting function in the limbs to preserve what little energy remains for the core. What should you look for? Pay attention to swelling that leaves a mark, nails that change color or texture, fingers that seem rounded, soft, or awkward, a new clumsiness with small objects. These aren't random issues. They are clear signals that the circulatory and neurological systems are in decline. Comfort can be offered through gentle elevation, soft compression socks if advised, and assistance with small tasks. But more than anything, awareness brings peace. When you know what's happening, you can respond with compassion instead of fear. Next, we'll look at one of the most personal and often misunderstood signs, changes in elimination. What happens with urine and bowel movements reveals exactly how the kidneys and intestines respond when life is nearing its end. Few topics are more difficult for families to talk about than elimination. But in the final stages of life, changes in urination and bowel movements can offer powerful clues about what's happening inside the body. These changes are not minor. They are not just signs of aging or diet. They reflect deep shifts in how the kidneys and intestines are functioning and how the body is reprioritizing its resources. Let's begin with urination. As circulation slows and the heart pumps less effectively, the kidneys receive less blood flow. This means they have fewer nutrients and less pressure available to filter waste products from the blood. The result is a drop in urine volume. The person may urinate less frequently, sometimes only once or twice a day. And when they do, the urine is often darker, more concentrated, and may carry a stronger odor. This is not necessarily a sign of dehydration. In fact, the body may be holding on to fluids intentionally, conserving every drop for vital organs. But the change in urine color and smell tells us that the kidneys are now operating in a low-power mode. In more advanced stages, the person may lose control of their bladder entirely, not because of inattention or carelessness, but because the muscles that control urination are no longer receiving strong signals from the nervous system. This leads to incontinence, which can be emotionally difficult for both the individual and their caregivers. Now let's look at bowel function. The digestive system is one of the first to downregulate when energy becomes scarce. You may notice the person having less frequent bowel movements, going days without a single episode. This is due to reduced blood flow to the intestines and a drop in the peristaltic waves that move stool through the colon. At the same time, the person may eat less or stop eating entirely, which further slows the system. But the opposite can also occur. Some individuals may experience persistent diarrhea in the final days of life. This can be caused by multiple factors: muscle weakness in the intestines, medication side effects, or the body's final efforts to eliminate waste before shutdown. Another common but misunderstood symptom is refusal to drink water. Families may see this as stubbornness, but in reality, it's a natural response. The body, sensing that the kidneys can no longer filter properly, reduces thirst and limits fluid intake to prevent overload or imbalance. What seems irrational is actually physiological wisdom. What should you watch for? A sudden change in urine color, a drop in frequency, loss of control, long gaps between bowel movements, or sudden, unexplained diarrhea, a reluctance to drink fluids. These are not hygiene issues. They are signs that the internal organs are nearing their final phase. Support can come through dignity. Gentle cleaning, skincare, and non-judgmental presence go a long way. And understanding the why behind these changes can reduce shame and increase compassion. In the next and final part, we'll explore what may be the most profound sign of all: changes in body temperature and thermal regulation. A final message from the body that it is preparing to let go. As the final chapter of life begins, the body starts to struggle with one of its most basic tasks: regulating internal temperature. This isn't just feeling a little colder than usual. It's a deeper, more profound breakdown in how the body balances heat and energy. The human body is designed to maintain a core temperature around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, but doing so requires a constant supply of oxygen, nutrients, and cellular energy. When these start to run low, when the heart slows, the lungs weaken, and the metabolism drops, the thermostat of the body begins to fail. You may notice the person feeling cold, even in a warm room. They may ask for extra blankets or thicker clothing. The hands and feet, already low in circulation, may feel ice cold to the touch. But here's what's remarkable. At the same time, the chest or forehead may feel unusually warm. Why? Because the body is doing something extraordinary. It's redirecting the last remaining energy and heat to the core, to the heart, lungs, brain, the vital organs that must function as long as possible. In doing so, it leaves the limbs behind. That's why there's a temperature mismatch between the center of the body and the extremities. This is not an accident. It's a form of biological triage, a last stand of the body's internal intelligence. But the signs go even deeper. Some individuals begin to sweat heavily, especially during the night. Caregivers may think it's a fever or infection, but often it's a malfunction in thermal regulation. The body no longer has the precision to maintain its temperature, and the sweat is a byproduct of that confusion. The skin may become damp and clammy, particularly around the neck, chest, or back. This isn't illness, it's transition. The hypothalamus, the part of the brain that manages temperature, is no longer receiving clear signals from the body. It's misfiring, trying to regulate something that can no longer be stabilized. You might also notice uneven temperature, one hand warm, the other cold, the back hot, the feet numb. These inconsistencies reflect the last stages of the body's energy distribution system unraveling. What should you look for? Ask yourself, is the person cold despite blank? Are there areas of sudden sweating? Does the skin feel patchy, part warm, part cool? Is their body giving off strange patterns of heat? If yes, it may be a sign that the final systems are winding down. At this stage, comfort becomes everything. Warmth, soft lighting, gentle presence. The body is not fighting. It is surrendering gracefully, wisely, and with purpose. And with that, we conclude the 8 signs. But there's one more message you need to hear. What we've explored in this video are not just medical facts. They are deeply human truths. Messages from the body that appear in the final stretch of life. These signs are not morbid. They're not frightening when you understand them. They're natural, and in many ways, they're sacred. Each change from appetite to temperature is a whisper from the body saying, I'm preparing. It's not giving up. It's adapting, shifting energy inward, moving gently toward closure. And while these signs often go unnoticed or misunderstood, recognizing them gives you something incredibly powerful. Time. Time to have important conversations. Time to show up with presence instead of panic. Time to offer comfort instead of confusion. If you're watching this and thinking of someone you love, a parent, a grandparent, a friend, know this. Your ability to observe, to learn, to care can make all the difference. You don't have to fix anything. You don't have to fight the process. Just be there. That, in itself, is an act of profound love. And if you recognized any of these signs, don't rush to conclusions. These signals are invitations to seek understanding, not declarations of finality. Reach out to a healthcare provider. Ask